Now we are to John Boone, the last speaker. John is going to do a wrap-up for us. He's going to talk about moving forward. What does this mean for the medical physicist and the imaging community? I think all of you know John. He is the chair of AAPM Science Council.
Thank you, Bill. And in the interest of time, what I'll be really talking about is where do we go from here, from this dose conference. And here are the 4 bins I was going to organize my thoughts in, but in the interest of time, I'll just talk about the first 2 bullet points, and then I'll cut to the end. So what national and international activities am I aware of, and you are probably as well aware, that reflect on CT dosimetry. And Science Council, this is the org chart of Science Council, and there's a CT subcommittee, and under that there are currently active 3 task groups. Task Group 111, which was discussed earlier. Bob Dixon's in the room and was the chair of it. It's posted on the outside the firewall at the AAPM website. This was a long effort. It involved industry, as you see highlighted, as well as the FDA and academic and consulting physicists as well. In short, what TG 111 does is go away from the old paradigm of using the CT-DI dose index concept to a smaller detector, perhaps with real-time readout capabilities, making use of the helical scanning capabilities of all modern CT scanners, where 1 or 2 scans gets you true dose information for a variety of different patients, for real patients. The issue of phantoms is a contentious one. We had intended to cover that in TG 111, but it was too contentious. We wanted to be timely, and so we put the phantom issue into another task group. I hope that will proceed in a more timely, less urgent manner. Clearly, the considerations of phantom design have to do with the length of the phantom, its shape, the composition, and diameter. The normal, we're physicists, and these are physical properties of the phantoms. Yesterday you heard me advocate and promise the Image Gently folks that we will have a task group yet to be numbered that will allow us to use CT-DI vol information on scanners with a correction factor shown here as a function of patient age or patient diameter to arrive at a reasonable dose estimate of a pediatric patient for a given CT scan, and we will complete that by RSNA, and Keith Strauss and I will co-chair that together. I happen to also chair the ICRU committee entitled Patient Dose Assessment and Image Quality in Computed Tomography. Here you see pictured are the members of this group, 4 of whom are in the room today. And you can see Cynthia lecturing us in Vienna there on one of our many international trips, mostly to Europe. So as a result of those discussions taking place over the last 5 years, trying to hit a moving target that CT is, as you all appreciate, is we've come up with, at least loosely designed here, as an ICRU CT phantom. The idea here is to measure image quality in the same phantom in which you measure dose. And so it has a dosimetric component using a Farmer chamber that you see here. And the idea is that you can use this to measure a standard dose on any vendor CT scanner. So you put this in, let's just say you get 8 milligray readout, and you want to standardize your dose to 10 milligray, so you up the MAS by 25%, and so you do a full helical scan through this again, you get 10 milligray, and you can then use this region to calculate the noise power spectrum, a more sophisticated analysis than that subjective eyeball of low contrast phantoms, so we can get curves that we can really use that are quantitative. You might up the technique to measure the spatial resolution on the hardware on the other end of the phantom. This is a $200 phantom made of polyethylene. It's 10 inches. It's the largest commercially available boule of polyethylene that I could find. So it makes it 25 centimeters in diameter. So the idea here is that we go away from the old era when I started the field, where you bought a $13,000 or $15,000 complicated CT phantom, and your analysis was nothing more than a simple eyeball on that data, and you basically had a perfunctory result. Our idea is to go with a simple phantom, go from $15,000 to maybe $500 after the machining's done to this, and more complicated, more sophisticated software analysis of the image data that comes from this phantom. And in doing so, we hope to have a useful and quantitative assessment of image quality at the same dose between a Siemens and a Toshiba and a Philips and a GE scanner. It's the only way we physicists can really talk about equalizing image quality as a function of dose. So historically, we've made use of these dose phantoms that we're all familiar with, and you see pictured here. I would claim that what we're mostly measuring are the properties of the phantom and less so the properties of the scanner, although there are some dependencies, of course. And the idea also in the ICRU is, of course, we'll measure upon acceptance testing of a scanner a full, comprehensive, phantom-based set of data. But the reality is it's the X-ray beam that comes out of the scanner port that really affects the radiation dose. And if it's consistent at time point 2 as it is with time point 1, you're going to get the same phantom measurements as well. And so the idea is that you can make measurements in both dimensions, the bow tie filter and the z-axis dimension, and come up with a profile here. And as long as that's consistent with last year and the year before, then you should have a good phantomless and relatively easy and quick assessment of the radiation output capabilities of the scanner. This is analogous to what we do in fluoroscopy and radiography, given the fact that CT scanners are now becoming two-dimensional beams instead of the older one-dimensional beam concept. There's other national and international activities that have been discussed at this conference, dose reporting by the ACR that Rick Morin touched on, reference doses that Jim Brink touched on with respect to the NCRP, and other DICOM header information that's moving forward, always too slowly, but nevertheless moving forward. Education and training. Let me just pass that. So there's conferences like this are obviously very useful. We can make use of the RSNA, a huge venue for training and CMEs. AAPM meetings, there's a lot of technologist-based meetings out there. I'll make an offer that we can take a very shortened version of this course to the ASRT or other technologist societies. I've already got approval from the principals here to make that statement to you. And meetings like this, of course, is today's meeting. So this is where we can learn more about what to do to get CT dose right. So I would make the claim, so this is a histogram of the occupants in this room, or the registrants to this meeting, and 76% of you are medical physicists. And I'll just say that radiologists and technologists don't design CT scanners, medical physicists do. And not all of us do. I do at my institution, but we are the ones that really should own this issue, and it's up to medical physicists to become the key go-to person in the Department of Radiology, wherever you work, as a consultant or as a employee of a hospital or a university, to own this issue. And we recognize, though, that amongst the community of medical physicists, we have CT experts and we have people who are more novice in this area. And so our first goal really is to use AAPM and other venues to get the medical physicist community up to the standard of an expert, at least in terms of the dosimetry aspects of CT. In that way, we can then engage industry, radiologists, and the technologist community to act as educators and consultants in moving forward with some of the ideas that have been talked about earlier today. And so I'll just point out that most of the incidences that led to today's meeting, really the dose information was on the console. And so in effect, these were the result of operator error. But in fairness to the technologists, for instance, at UC Davis, we have 9 CT scanners in 3 different sites, 2 of which are the same. So the techs have to learn 8 different interfaces, which is ridiculous. And by the way, those of the 3 vendors we have, some interfaces are designed in Japan, some in Germany, and some in the U.S. Totally different conceptually based upon the cultures of those 3 different continents. So this is my mock-up with the intention of being generic in terms of a console on a CT scanner, and you can see that there's a lot of numbers. The techs are very busy. They're getting phone calls, hounded all the time. There's 3 patients in the hall waiting to be scanned. To sit there and look at these numbers is an unrealistic expectation for someone doing this day in and day out. I'm not a big believer of the pop-up idea, and I share Rich Mather's a presentation to a META group that was held at the RSNA last year, and that made me think during his talk, and this is my proposal, is rather than having a pop-up which impedes flow, and basically you just click right through it, you don't even bother reading it after you've seen it 10 times, is to have something that catches your eye. So this is the reference dose, if you will, for this exam. This is the technique. This results or reflects the technique that you've dialed up. And the idea here then is that this is a very visual thing. It's got red on it. It catches your eye. And this is too high that you can see just very visually. So one could adjust the parameters downward and get the technique right. The key to this, I think, is that there should be some mandate or some agreement amongst the vendors that they have some version of this on every vendor's home page or the control software because of all these because the technologists go from scanner to scanner, and wouldn't it be nice if the warning system was consistent between the different vendor scanners? The other thing that I have been advocating, and I advocated at that RSNA meeting, and we've been kind of talking about it here offline, is some training modules. And so the idea is that no physicist in the room or radiologist or technologist has the bandwidth to go in and understand the dose parameters on every vendor and every model of every vendor's scanner. And so the idea here, and META has tentatively, and the vendors have tentatively agreed to this, is that we would ask the vendors to put together 3 slides for every model CT scanner that they make. And so, and provide that to the APM. This is a collaboration between the APM. We're not being stingy. We can share it with anybody, of course. And so this would have a screenshot of the actual console of that particular model for each vendor. And what we would do, the APM that is, we would build maybe a 10-slide introductory, this is how CT works, maybe Cynthia or I or Diana or Mike or whoever would build this is for technologists, and then we would be able to download and plug into this talk specific to that site if you're a consulting physicist, or to your institution if you're an employee of a hospital. And so you have these individual modules that the technologists can relate to. They go, well, I look at that screen every day. I never really realized that button did that. And so we can get down and figure out how the scanners work and which controls on the scanners affect dose and some don't. I'll give you one example: is none of the consoles that I'm aware of show you what bow tie filter is being used, and that's perhaps a 10 or 20% issue with respect to radiation dose. So I'm going to just go to the end here. See if that's too far. Okay. So, sitting around the bar last night, Rick Morin suggested that I conclude with not a sunset, but a sunrise. And this was taken from my hotel room yesterday morning at the beginning of this conference that we've been here for 2 days. And so you see the 3 individuals there. Of course, I kind of cut through what they mean, but they're meant to reflect the radiologist, the medical physicist, and the radiologic technologist. And we really need to go from this day forward and from this a meeting forward at two levels. At the individual level, the radiologists and the medical physicists and the techs at a given institution need to do what Jim Koffler was talking about, have monthly meetings or some reasonable periodicity of meetings, and that's the only way you're going to actually do anything to affect change and get things going right. At a more global level, the radiological societies that involve radiologists, like the RSNA, etc., the AAPM and medical physicist societies, as well as the technologist societies, ASRT, need to come together along with the other organizations, FDA, Imagenologia, etc., to take the energy in this room and move forward, and I think we've got a good start on that. And with that, thank you for your attention, and I'll turn it back over to Bill.